though you lose by a run, the truth is you've lost. And that's not good enough. So I think a good lesson to learn from the TiE Handi guys, that you know what, almost is not good enough, right? You've got to get to your targets. So I think this is just, you know, if you just put it together, something as simple as a TiE Handi can actually teach us all lessons on what winning teams are all about. And like I said, you know, I think the TiE Handi is happening in our lives all around us, wherever you look. The question is, are we looking and can we find something that's actually happening? So that's all I have to say for the day, and I hope you know you got a sense of what I think it takes to win. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and answer them. Or indeed, if you have any comments, happy to take them on too.
What made you write a book?
I was waiting for a long time for TiE to call me. They wouldn't. No, I think, like I said earlier, I used to enjoy putting some of these things together, talking to teams, and I actually enjoyed the idea. And I figured that, look, if you try and tell someone to do something, they don't necessarily listen. But if you tell them a story, it tends to work pretty well. So I started putting these stories together, and I started blogging. And I had a blog up, and then of course I started seeing a response to the blog which suggested that it could work. And then it struck me that maybe it's not a bad idea to try and convert this into a book. And I think at some level many of us have this, you know, this, I think entrepreneurs call it Kida. Just one other person's life looked like an interesting one, and so the book was born. Sir.
Obviously, looking at this and looking at your book, you are very successful, and that reflects in the book also. Now, question is this: Michelangelo.
Yeah.
Somebody chipped one by one and created that statue. In your case specifically, did you chip things yourself, or are there external forces like Kimberly-Clark or HLL which shaped you? It looks like to me that a lot of stories look self-inspired from you. So I'm just wondering that, is it that the model of Michelangelo is true, or sometimes the chipping takes place by yourself?
Thanks for all the kind words. Not sure I deserve all of it, but let me confess with complete honesty. I think it's other people. I think I was very lucky that I got to work with people. Not only work with people, if I think about it, even my parents. I think the way my parents might have talked to me or done things for me, I think that made a difference to my life. If I look at bosses, I was lucky that I worked with people who taught me stuff, who taught me lessons, you know, and what happens, I think, is that we all want to achieve something. We all have goals. We all want to be successful. But if no one tells you how to do it, you can actually be lost. And the truth is, no man would ever take a hammer and start banging himself, because he starts saying, man, I'm the best thing on earth. You know, we can't see our own flaws. We need that mirror. We need that mentor, that friend, that colleague, someone else who can actually help you to chip away some of the stuff. What it takes for us is, I think, and that's something that again we can all learn, which is to say that, you know, there are other people who are there to help you. Not everybody is your competitor. Not everybody is out to get you. There are a whole lot of people out there who are trying to help you to do well. And I think that's true for all of us. And most people who do well also figure that if they have to succeed, they have to help other people to succeed. So it's a vicious cycle waiting to happen for all of us. And I think I was lucky that I had lots of other people who did it for me. So that's really where it is.
I think in one of the book called Good to Great, I guess that book has a special chapter on Kimberly-Clark.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So I just want to ask, it's probably one of the best companies I guess to work for.
And it certainly was one of those benchmark companies in that Good to Great stories that Jim Collins had. Yeah.
My question is this: what are the lessons you learned from that versus from HLL? Not necessarily want to compare, but like what do you learn from that?
I think there are very, very different lessons to learn from both these companies. I think Kimberly-Clark is a great example of a financially prudent disciplined business, which has stayed focused, taken very low risk, believed in financial metrics, therefore ensuring that that you deliver on return on capital employed. And if you use that as a measure and say, that's what I'm going to be focused on, let me do what's right for that. Let me do what's right for my shareholders. And not try and reach out too far too soon. I think it's a great example of a company that's done it right. So you can imagine, it's now a close to $20 billion business, right? And what are the brands we have? If you take any other company which is this size, you'll find there's a plethora of brands, different categories, different acquisitions around the world, lots of excitement, right? Kimberly-Clark, none of it. We have 4 brands. That's it. Huggies. I mean, how much money can you make cleaning a child's bottom? $5 billion. That's a hell of a lot of money, but that's what the power of focus has done for them. If I flip it over and I say, look, what is it that Kimberly-Clark has not necessarily done too well? I think it's in the area of not taking enough risk. And maybe, and we're now as an organization trying to tell ourselves, learn to take smart risks. And so in our values, we now have sentences like, reward sensible risk-taking behavior. Which is rubbish, because it doesn't say reward guys who mess up and make mistakes. Because sensible risk-taking behavior is what happens in the beginning. After it goes wrong, they say, this is such a stupid idea. Whose idea was it? Right? So I think we don't take enough of a risk. We've also not gone international. And I think Unilever was a great example of a business that very quickly went out of the UK and Dutchland, as it were, and established itself around the world. It's also a great leadership factory, and I think one of the biggest successes that Hindustan Lever has enjoyed in this country has been because I think they have a fantastic training program, and sometimes it's like that Tata Steel one about we also make steel. Hindustan Lever could probably say we also make soap. I think they're pretty good at also turning out great guys, and I say this in all modesty because they had salespeople who were, I think, outstanding. So they were guys who would give their life for that company and spend 35, 40 years just going from Asansol to Durgapur to Howrah, just selling soap. And they did it all their life. Why? Because they believed that there was a business which was inspiring them to do it for something. So I think great organizations have this ability to make a dream come alive and make people feel excited about that dream. And I think Lever does that extremely well. Yep, thanks. Yep.
How do you take this message of yours to schools and colleges?
Yeah, I guess you do it the way you do anything else, just one small step at a time. I don't know if there are too many ideas, but I'd be quite excited to see how can I take it to schools and colleges. As a start, I try and do this in colleges, and I just enjoy talking to young kids and try and tell them what might work in their lives. And I say this not with any other interest, but the fact that at work, I've seen a lot of. I've been a management trainee in my life myself. I've gone and sold soap in my life, and I've often found that you get these bright young people who come and work with you. And they're exceptional, they're very confident, they are bright, and they do very well. And then suddenly 3-4 years later or 10 years later, you find they've fallen off, right? Why is it that some people can make successes out of their careers and some people tend to fall off, delivering much less than their potential? And I think it's because someone hasn't told them a few things. And if they would just learn some of these simple things, they could become a lot better. They could become a lot happier too. I think that's the other message that I would have. I think it's important to be happy with what you're doing. So if you have some ideas on how to take it forward, I'd be more than happy to see, to share this message as it were. Sorry.
I just wanted to give one idea. Is record this and put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Record the session. I mean that's the easiest way.
We do it.
Oh, session.
Yeah. And poor penguin will be saying, "Yeah, फिर भुगतान खरीदेगा." Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah.
You're a big fan of the Indian cricket team, who seem to have lost the winning habit. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah.
2 or 3 things, please.
Yeah, I think the first would be, keep the faith, and that should probably be the last one. I think it's very easy to panic, and what tends to happen is when a team is winning, you can gloss over your mistakes, and you don't necessarily, because you're strong in some suit, your weaknesses can get hidden easily. I think that a good rule to follow would be, if it ain't broke, fix it. So if I take the Indian team, for example, our fielding has always been very poor, our fast bowling resources have always been thin, but our batting kind of saw us through. But I think the time to ring the alarm bell would have been when you were doing well, and to have probably brought in a rule that says, unless you can run and stop a ball and be completely fit, you had no business playing for us. So maybe that's one big difference. The second one, I think, is, it's a lesson I've learned out of colleagues in the diaper business, where I have a Korean colleague who was telling me about the output from his machines in Korea. And I was horrified to find that, we have identical machines, and the output from his machines is like, 40-45% higher than ours. And I said, impossible, And I said, come on, I mean, there are only 7 days in a week. How could you do this? He said, yeah, but we only work them for 6 days in a week. 7th day is mandatory shutdown. Okay? And in our case, we are, good old Indian, run as hard as you can. So when the going is good, push. So we don't take shutdowns. And I think machines and men need that shutdown. And I think one of the mistakes the Indian team has done is not to give enough downtime. And that's meant that people have been carrying injuries, people have been unfit. You win a World Cup and before you know it, you're out playing another game in some inconsequential empty stadium in some part of the country. I think those are probably some of the things that have hurt us. But I'd go back to the first one, which is fundamentally if teams are strong, they learn to come back. So maybe the Indian team looked a lot better than it was when it was winning, and it's looking a lot worse than it is when it's losing. So maybe both of them are not quite the true pictures. I've had role models, and I would probably name a couple. I'd probably say that there was a man called Suman Sinha. Suman used to be a director in Hindustan Lever, and I worked closely with him at some stage in my career there. And then, as it happened, when I went to work with Pepsi, he was actually the CEO of Pepsi in India and did a great job of building that business. So he's been a huge mentor, and I think I've learned a lot from him. But I'll give you a couple of small examples. I think one was that Suman had this classic slide of the organization structure, and that showed the inverted pyramid. So it would have the salesmen on top and the factory people on top and their managers below them and their heads of department below them and the chairman at the bottom supporting the entire organization. And he said, he actually believed that organizations are meant to service these people, and mistakes companies make is to put the chairman on top so that, what is his next private jet going to be becomes the big priority for the organization. So I think it's good to focus your attention on the rest of the team, and you can do a lot from there.
Sandeep talked about taking this lesson to schools and education. I read one of your interviews where you talked about how this traditional education, more than that, what is important is having a PhD. So would you please expand on that, because that was one of the wonderful interviews I read recently.
Thanks. So what I basically try to say is it's not so much about education, it's about, so what's the secret to success in life? I said, get a PhD. Now, obviously, anybody who's done a PhD will tell you, yaar, ye to usko kuch pata nahi hai. So my interpretation of a PhD was not the classical doctorate of